I was gonna ask, what do you think about MBTI in general? Like,
That's the thing. So like I kind of I kind of asked you like my MBTI because I was just curious, but like in general, I just do not think it's a really good system. Um, that's the thing though. Like even if it's not a good system, it's still like it still gathers similar people around each other, because people will like that's how people meet without the whole theory stuff.
yeah, because I don't know how to feel about it because everybody always talks so negatively about MBTI from what I see on the internet.
Like in the MBTI forums or like outside.
Outside, I guess.
Okay.
Like, like, Jordan Peterson talks crap about it
Yeah, yeah.
and people like that. But
And so that's the thing. Yeah, yeah, go ahead.
like I've seen videos of people just saying how it basically is nothing but another what is it? Astrology or
Astrology?
yeah.
Yeah.
And it's all just about making people feel special and putting people into boxes and telling them positive things about themselves. Which I can understand
Yeah.
if they're saying that about the website 16 personalities kind of does that. But I don't think you can say that about the whole of MBTI.
Yeah, and that's sort of like the problem I have with these psychologists because like everybody can go around like denouncing these systems that categorize people, but then they don't offer their own system to replace it.
Well,
Because all
Jordan Peterson did.
really, what was his system?
Well, he's a big fan of the Big Five.
Yeah, the big five though, like that's not really putting people into categories. That's just more like just measuring people based off like dichotomies. Like there's no like box here. It's a spectrum.
Well, it's still kind of putting you in a box of like either if you're agreeable or not and stuff like that, right?
Yeah, but like that's the thing though, with big five, you're not like a certain type. Like you're not like a like what's it called? There's like a big five typology. You're not an RLCAI or however they call it. You're not like they don't put you into one box and give you a whole profile. They just like
Right.
sort
Well,
of say
why do they need to do that?
because people just like to be categorized. And also like something I think is that there's actual like personality patterns. They're static. It's not just on a spectrum, but it's static personality patterns that the MBTI is trying to like describe in its own way to people. So I might be making my point like very unclear right now, but let's say do you know about the personality disorders like in the DSM?
I know about some of them.
So yeah, you have like what is there? There's narcissist, there's the histrionic, there's borderline,
Hmm.
schizoid, avoidant.
Yeah.
Like for instance, that one guy in the server, Gab,
Yeah.
he was a schizoid, right?
Right.
He literally got diagnosed. That's an actual personality pattern. It's not just a personality disorder. Personality disorders themselves are based on personality patterns that have been found
Right.
like
Yeah.
in the 1950s, 1960s, whatever. And so that's sort of what the MBTI tries to like categorize people as, but it doesn't say it explicitly. So for instance,
Right.
you have the description of an ISTP, for instance. What do you think when you think of an ISTP? Like you think of a quiet guy, you think of someone who's reserved, you think of someone who minds their own business, is practical, doesn't really feel a whole lot. So, and you see this pattern among some people. Like you see someone who's quiet and passive, you will label them as an ISTP. But what in reality what you're seeing is the schizoid personality pattern, most likely. So that's sort of how the MBTI sort of simplifies things a little bit. I don't know if I'm explaining this clearly.
Hmm. Well, there's a couple possibilities. It's possible that they're both um, looking at the same thing and categorizing it differently, or it's possible that there's just some overlap and these things are separate.
That's the thing. I think first thing, they're looking at the same thing, they're recognizing the same patterns, but they're just calling it different names. But why would you like say someone is an ISTP when you can say they are a schizoid instead? Because if you label them as a schizoid, then you can get all the psychology like written about schizoid personality like in the textbooks or whatever. There's a lot of research on like each personality pattern, like
It's,
formal research.
but this is where I just don't have enough knowledge to really say, but I would think that that's an oversimplification of what the ISTP is, and then if you looked at it deeper, it would, it wouldn't be exactly the same thing as just like a schizoid.
And yes, there could be like some overlap with other like personality patterns. So like the schizoid and the avoidant, they can look alike, right? They're both like quiet, but the schizoid is sort of like doesn't feel much, whereas the avoidant is like too like hypersensitive. And so the schizoid and the avoidant, they can be distinguished, but there's also people with both schizoid and avoidant traits. And so yeah, if you're yeah, it sort of gets murky like past a certain point. But my point is, why would you go off the MBTI when you can use the personality pattern used by the actual psychologists, right?
Is that your actual thoughts, or are you just giving like examples?
Like what you what my actual thought is like ISTP being a schizoid.
And that why would you go off of MBTI instead of using, like the DSM?
Oh no, I would go off the DSM instead of using the MBTI, but not even the
Well, they
DSM.
have
I
different
would actually.
jobs, right?
I'm sorry.
They have different functions, right?
How would you describe that? What do you mean by that?
The DSM is all about recognizing what I would call problematic personality traits and trying to, um, I don't know, remedy or lessen the negative impacts of those traits on people. Whereas the MBTI is just trying to flesh out and understand the human mind and categorize people to make it easier to understand them.
So yeah, that's sort of where the personality rabbit hole like runs pretty deep, because the DSM itself it pathologizes regular personality patterns. So take a narcissist, for instance, a narcissistic personality disorder. That's we know we look upon that as negative, right? Narcissists are selfish. They only think about themselves. They lack empathy, and so on. But the narcissistic personality disorder is just a part of what is called the narcissistic personality spectrum, right? And this is not pathological. This is actually like found in many people across life that seem to function well in life, you know? So take your ambitious like politician, for instance. They could probably fall on the narcissistic personality spectrum, right? But they probably wouldn't reach the criteria to be diagnosed at with NPD. It's just like the DSM itself just pathologizes normal personality patterns. Actually, you get what I'm saying?
Maybe. But isn't it mainly talking about once it meets these criteria, you have narcissistic personality disorder, and it talks about it as if it's like a problem.
Yeah, and that's the whole problem with psychiatry to begin with, because it is like categorizing as a problem patterns that are in fact like normal,
I don't
should I
think that
say.
I don't think it's a bad thing because the categories like you have to meet extreme requirements to be labeled as some of these things. Like these aren't normal. It's not normal to have NPD.
But the criteria itself is sort of arbitrary, because what if you only meet four out of five of four out of the five criteria, you know?
Well, that's
Like the
just like a
personality.
guideline. It's like a guideline. I don't think it's like, oh, well, you're one off, so you're not it. It's kind of up to interpretation, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, but yeah, that's still the thing, because there are like more like disorderly variants, you know, like there's pathological narcissism, but there's also the normal narcissistic personality, which is much more common, and it's probably more like what we would recognize in everyday life. So yeah, you're ambitious politician, or you're just someone who's just snobby or stuck up. They could have like the narcissistic personality pattern, but they probably would not reach the criteria for disorder, you know.
Yeah, I feel like this is more to my argument than your argument, though.
How so?
Because you're saying that they're labeling normal things as being bad.
Yeah,
Whenever
that's right.
the normal is not reaching these qualifications. It's not normal to reach those, you just said.
I don't know how to. I'm sorry if I'm not
It's
explaining this well. It's like yeah, go on.
was it you just said that most people would fall on the spectrum and have narcissistic qualities, but they would not meet the qualifications to be diagnosed with it. And that's my point that it's not, calling something normal problematic because it's not normal to meet these things. It's just like I think that I'm a fairly narcissistic person in some ways, but I don't think that I could be, you know, um, diagnosed with NPD or any narcissistic personality disorder.
Yeah, yeah. It's I think our arguments kind of like converge. Like it's just a weird problem, because like you can have a new system of how to diagnose people. Like um it's I'm gonna have to let me see here. There's this psychologist who died like around 10 years ago. His name is Theodore Milan, and he pretty much developed his own system of personality types that are based upon the personality disorders known in the DSM, plus a few others. So you've got like the the histrionic spectrum, you've got the negativistic spectrum, you even got the sadistic spectrum. But it's just like it's not innately um pathologizing these normal personality patterns. It only pathologizes it when it gets to a certain point where you're starting to really malfunction socially, you know?
Yeah.
Like, I don't know if I'm making it clear still. It's like kind of a weird issue, because you kind of have to think like, how does society like really diagnose something as a disorder? Because autism spectrum, for instance, that's called a disorder, even though we know that like several people on the autistic spectrum have contributed greatly to humanity. So how is really that neurological difference a disorder, you know?
Because um, I'm not 100%, but I would say just by connecting the dots of everything that we've said about it, about the DSM so far, is that I would guess that there would be a spectrum of autism. And once you meet a certain qualification, it would be a negative amount of, autism.
Yeah. Yeah, that's pretty much what I'm saying.
And I would say, I would guess the majority of people that are a positive to society are beneath those requirements.
Yes, what we deem as positive. Yes. it would be below those requirements.
So it sounds to me like the DSM isn't a negative thing. I don't know how you can argue that it's negative.
Um, yeah, I'm saying the DSM is negative because it sort of gives like a short-sighted view of like actual personality patterns, you know?
Well,
Because just by
everything is short-sighted, most of the time. You know what I mean?
yeah,
You could basically
yeah,
say that about everything.
yeah, yeah, I guess so. Yeah,
So I mean, I guess that's a
yeah,
fair critique, but you have to understand that. I mean, you could use that critique on almost anything.
yeah, I guess so. Yeah, yeah, same thing like MBTI. It's short-sighted. It doesn't really go deep as much as it can, you know?
Right. But I mean, it's kind of hard to really get deep into something like psychology because it's such a mystery and it's hard for us to really quantify anything.
Yeah, and that's another thing about psychology too, because recently, like the past 20 or 30 years, I'm not really sure actually, but psychology has tried to be more of a science, you know,
Yeah.
whereas like back in Freud's day, it was more of like a just a theoretical system. It was kind of like a philosophy, even, you know.
Yeah.
But like,
People take it a lot more serious nowadays.
well, it's not that it's taken more seriously. It's just that now it's like based on like the scientific method, you know. But the scientific method itself has some limitations because it's just like slow and methodical and it's empirical. Whereas like Freud, for instance, he was more theoretical and he was like when he came up with the concepts id, ego, superego, that's not something you get from science. That's something you have to like conceptualize.
Right.
And then he kind of had to like prove the existence of these like abstract psychological structures. And he couldn't do that with science.
Right. That's what I meant whenever I said serious. We take it seriously. I think of that as being like methodical and scientific. I think that that's serious.
Yeah,
Uh,
in a way, yes. But I don't want like if you call that
yeah.
serious, I don't want that to mean that the
I
theorizing is not serious, you
I
know?
know that this is the problem that I have with language. I don't like language.
Ah, yeah, 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 that's the thing.
Words can mean so many different things. If you liked this video, please consider liking and subscribing for more content.